This is the plaintiff, Beth Cooley, and she's suing her former tenant for damages to her rental of $4,783. She said the tenant hammered holes and etched a mysterious Venn diagram into the wall. This is the defendant, George Hammer, who claims he didn't create any damages and that Beth is a rich landlord trying to steal from a poor renter. This is the case of the mysterious Venn diagram.
Will all parties please raise their right hand?
What you're about to hear is only real in your imagination. The judgments are fictitious, but real-life lessons are waiting around the bend. Welcome to RentPrep Court.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Rudy Fortune.
Beth Cooley, you are suing Mr. Hammer for damages of $4,783 because you claim that the defendant purposefully damaged your rental. You said he even etched a Venn diagram into the wall. Is that correct?
Your Honor, I was having issues with Mr. Hammer paying rent on time, so I sent him a pay or quit notice. After that, he started sending me aggressive texts. This just led me to believe I was making the right decision to proceed forward with an eviction. When I finally got the tenant out of the rental, there was substantial damage done to the property.
Do you have any photos and documentation of the rental before moving?
Yes, Your Honor. I have a copy of the lease here, along with photos of the rental and a signed move-in condition form from the renter. I couldn't believe how much damage had been done, with holes punched into the wall, and for some reason, a weird Venn diagram etched into the wall.
I see your ducklings are all in a row here. Mr. Hammer, what would you like to say to defend these claims?
This has nothing to do with me, Your Honor. I handed over the keys and moved out a week ago. A vandal must have broken into the rental and did these damages.
Mrs. Cooley, is this true that the damages occurred after the tenant moved out?
No, Your Honor, that's not true. The tenant was late on rent, and according to our lease and state laws, I served him a 3-day pay or quit notice on his door on the 5th of December. I could not get in touch with Mr. Hammer, so a couple of days later, I posted notice of entry on his door as well. 24 hours later, I entered the rental, and that's when I found he had left the rental after trashing it. The photos I gave you are dated the 8th of December, and all he left was the keys to the apartment.
Your Honor, I showed up to the court to defend my innocence. She's a rich landlady trying to pin her problems on me. I don't have any money and I didn't do any of the damage.
Your story, Mr. Hammer, reminds me of a time I saved up for my first car. I was so poor, my friends used to say I had a tumbleweed for a pet. I was 17 years old, and it took me 2 years of rolling up sleeves and washing dishes at Flo's Diner to buy a used 1960 Chevy Corvair. You see, deep in the South, sushi is still called bait. And back then, you bought a car on a handshake. I was pretty wet behind the ears, and that I bought the car without giving it a proper inspection. I pulled up the car to my friend's house, all excited as I popped open the hood to show off my new prize. And wouldn't you know, the engine was nowhere to be found. I was so embarrassed to find out that particular vehicle's engine is housed in the trunk of the car. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you, Mr. Hammer?
No, I don't have a clue what that has to do with anything. I didn't do any of the damage.
What is it exactly that you claim you haven't done here, Mr. Hammer?
I didn't pound holes or etch that penis into the wall, sir.
Mr. Hammer, have you actually ever seen pictures of the damages?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Hammer, you see, I looked at that 60 Corvair, and I assumed the engine would be under the hood. By all accounts, Mrs. Cooley is a good landlord, but a poor judge of graffiti. As you pointed out, that is not a Venn diagram etched into her wall, but a crudely drawn depiction of the male genitals.
Oh, my heavens.
Now, I'd imagine Mrs. Cooley feels like I did when I found out the engine was in the back of the car and not the front. However, I'd rather be caught embarrassed than caught in a lie. Mr. Hammer, how would you have known if it wasn't a Venn diagram on that wall without ever seeing the photos? I believe you are guilty of these damages based on the evidence presented here today, and my verdict is a payment of $4,783 to be paid to the plaintiff.
Well, the Honorable Judge sided with the landlord, and inquiring minds would like to know what Steve and Eric think about this judgment in the case of the awkward Venn diagram.
So, Steve, be honest.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this business podcast mentioning penises on it?
I think it's an important topic that we need to discuss.
There's no stone that gets left unturned here at RentPrep.
None. Nothing is off the table. This is something that I'm sure everyone has seen. Graffiti driving through the city. I know up here in Buffalo or in the Northeast, you get a cold day and some prankster draws it on your car window or something in the snow. Who knows?
But there's a good chance that might end up on your window after today's shift now. But
probably.
But I think it's worth noting that this is actually a real story. Beth is a member of our Facebook group at RentPrep for Landlords, and she posted this funny photo that kind of cropped it out a little bit. And she said, "What do you guys think this is?" Because I was confused and I thought it was a Venn diagram.
Right.
And later in that post, she revealed the entire image, and that is when you saw the male genitals that somebody had etched into her wall that was a former renter. So this stuff happens. I mean, it's a little goofy, but that's why we're talking about it and got a kind of silly episode here. But one of the things that you can do is if you are interested in the photo, you can go to rentprep.com and you can click on podcast in our main menu and see this episode and see the notes on it. I think this is episode like 185 or something. I'm kind of doing that from memory right now. But Steve, what are some of your thoughts as far as the episode itself? Like, is there anything that kind of stood out to you as far as the way that Beth handled herself?
Yeah, I thought that she did a really good job through the self-help eviction process, right?
Okay.
Issuing the notices in the proper and timely fashion, posting that notice on the door, and going through and taking all the steps in the way that you need to. I think hopefully long gone are the old days where landlords would resort to old-fashioned lockouts or shutting the utilities off or, you know.
That is the self-help eviction, right? If you're doing that yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from doing some research on this in the past, I was really surprised because you'd think like, okay, yeah, if you lock somebody out of their apartment, it's not a good thing. That's where they live. So you might get hit with a fine or something. But there's all sorts of fines that can be levied against you, including like if you turn the utilities off and they had food in the fridge, right? You're on the hook for all that food cost.
Right.
There's also fines depending on your municipality per day. And then, of course, if you go to court and, you know, the tenant might be in the wrong for everything they did, but because of what you did as a landlord, it's just going to wash out and you're not going to get anything, I would say.
I think those are the most frustrating stories, especially for landlords to hear, too. A story where the landlord is the clear victim, but because of, you know, something that they did wrong in the process, something that was done, you know, not in the timely way that it should have been, or some sort of loophole that they are losing. And so it's really, really, really important. If you get into evictions, if you're even questioning it or doubting it, you don't know what you're doing, use an attorney. It definitely makes sense. If you go on it on your own, just make sure you're not doing anything outside of the law. You're following everything to the T.
Yep. And another thing that I liked from this, well, I'm saying it's like Beth actually did these things. I'm going to communicate with Beth and see what happens with her trial. She has a pending trial as of right now. So on a future episode, I'll let you know what happened in her situation, if she was able to collect, because I believe she's taking this former tenant to a small claims court. But in this story, we talked about a notice to enter. So I think that's important to mention because this all depends on your state, right? And some states, you don't even need to provide a notice to enter, which I think is kind of crazy. You can just walk right in. Other states, it's 24 hours. Other states, it's 48 hours, not including weekends. So if you're going to find yourself in a situation where you think the tenant's damaging your property, one of the worst things you can do is just barge in on them unannounced, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. It's a good way to get shot, too, obviously. I mean, it's just not a good idea, you know, in any way. I think that you want to make sure that you're giving proper notice. You're doing everything by the book. And, obviously safety is paramount. You just don't know what you're walking into in a lot of situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this, not to be self-serving with this episode, but if you got somebody who's, etching a penis into your wall, probably not the best tenant. And maybe that person could be kind of screened out through the process. So just try to hone in on your screening process to try to, maybe that could be a question on your rental application. Have you ever previously etched a penis into your landlord's wall?
I think you should have to provide like a portfolio and be like, these penises don't look very good. I don't need that on my wall.
Well, it could be like American Vandal, where they're like the ball hair.
yeah. They're getting
like,
very.
that was not me, Your Honor.
Right.
I do not put ball hair on there.
Right. Eric's referencing a documentary that's on Netflix right now, which is somewhat related to this topic.
It's very related.
Yeah, of this sort of obsession that adolescents typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not an adult thing, so I think that's kind of the crazy part of this podcast story in particular. But this is like a phase that a lot of boys go through where they want to draw penises. Mm-hmm. And in this documentary, they basically, they took a forensic eye to it. I appreciate the effort that they put into figuring out, was it him or was it not him?
Yeah.
Obviously screening is going to help hedge your risk, and screening is always a good idea, but there may not be a proper screening tool for knowing whether or not they're going to draw penises ahead of time. So best thing you could do as a landlord is be prepared and think ahead. Always take pictures before move in.
Well, you know what, too? Let's look at this from the perspective of this renter, right? His name is George Hammer in this piece. Now, he's going to have to go live somewhere else, right? And he's going to have to rent from there.
Yeah.
So when this guy gives his rental application to the next place, what do you think he's going to do? He's not going to list Beth on there as his landlord.
Right.
So he's going to make something up. But that's a great opportunity that the next landlord to make sure they're doing their due diligence. Like, is everything matching up? Is the information making sense? And you might be able to catch this person in a lie because they're having their friend pretend like it's their former landlord.
Sure. Yeah, I think you make a good point there with matching things up too, because a lot of times somebody will list their previous landlord, but not their current landlord. Mm. And so you may call the previous landlord and get a very real verification, and nothing.
No penises
fishy.
were drawn.
No penises were drawn, and everything's great. And
just want to see how many times I can mention penis in this episode.
Yeah. So, it's really, really important to make sure that you're following the correct timeline. If they give you the information and you verify it and it's off by a few months, don't just assume that, something's wrong, but it's fine. If it's off by a few months, there's a good chance that they've lived somewhere for a few months and they're hiding that place, and hiding the landlord, and don't want you to talk to that landlord. So it's a good idea to really, really make sure that everything adds up the way that it should.
Now, let's say that instead of putting Beth on there, they say their current landlord is, I don't know, Tim, give me a last name, Christmas,
yes.
Right? The holidays are coming up here. Tim Christmas. Okay. So if you call Tim Christmas, how are you going to try to catch him in a lie? Like, what would you say in that verification call? And we could even role play it.
Sure.
Let's say you're calling and I'm pretending to be this guy's friend and I was his former landlord, Tim Christmas.
Sure. So, I'm calling. So Tim, you rented from Mr. Hammer. Is that right?
Or Mr. Hammer rented from
Mr.
Tim.
Hammer rented from you. Correct. Mm-hmm. What was the address that he was renting from?
That was 15 Candy Lane Village.
Now, the reason I'm asking, side note here, the reason I'm asking is because most of the time friends don't know their friends' actual physical addresses. Mm-hmm. They can't tell you a specific house number. A lot of times if they know the specific house number, they don't know the area code, or the zip code, rather. So I'm going to, and you should have all this information filled out on the application. And if you have a no blank space policy, when you're collecting rental applications, you should have all of this, including the zip code as well.
Yeah. So what Steve did there, the first question he asked was an open-ended question. It wasn't close-ended in that, did George rent from you at 15 Candyville Lane, or whatever it is? You asked, what was the address? And then what are some other examples of questions you can ask that are open-ended that you can use to kind of catch somebody in a lie?
Yeah, I like to call these loaded questions. I know the answers because I see what's written on the application. So I'm asking you questions that I should know the answer, and I should just be checking them off as I go, that you're giving me the exact same answer. So it's going to be the address that they lived at, how much did he pay in rent, If they give you like an I don't know or an unsure answer, I know that a lot of property managers will purposely throw out something crazy. So let's have an example here that let's say the rent that he listed on the application was like $600 a month. If you're telling me I don't know what the rent amount was, I might say something like, well, you can give me a range. Do you think it was like $1,000 a month? Does that sound about right? And I'm almost trying to bait you into thinking,
Yeah.
okay,
if I don't know the answer, I think it was 1,000.
Right. Now, as a landlord, you know the difference between $600 and $1,000 a month in rent. That is huge.
You might not remember when that person moved in, moved out, or stuff
Right.
like that, but you will remember what people pay you for rent.
Yeah, you know that your property is not getting $1,000 a month in rent, especially if you're charging $600. You just know that's such a discrepancy. That's going to raise a huge red flag. You as a landlord is going to say, no, that's way off. That's not even close to being right. So, and then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to ask typical questions like, did they pay their rent on time? Did they ever pay late? How many people were there? How many occupants? So I'm looking to see if there's...
Did they have any pets?
Yeah, they have any pets? Was there a co-occupant that may have applied also and listed this as the former or current address? So if he says, no, it was just him, that might raise a red flag right there as well. And so again, I'm just trying to get as many answers as I can without releasing or divulging the fact that I know these answers or that they've been provided to me. And you're just sort of gauging it on it. And then as a good rule of thumb, it's never a bad idea to just run that address real quick through your local county website, the assessor, and see if that person is in fact the owner of the property.
Yep.
And that's also a good question to ask when you've got them on the phone is, are you the owner of the property? Do you manage the property? If they say I manage the property, the next logical question is who's the owner of the property? So you want to make sure that everything matches up and everything aligns correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are listening, take the time to do those phone call verifications. If you want to, you can run those through RentPrep. We offer phone verifications in our Platinum package. But I'd like to end this episode by just saying thank you to a few people. We get some people that give us feedback in the group. Stephen West, we appreciate it. I've seen a couple comments from you in the group just saying that you really like these RentPrep Court episodes. Makes me feel good. I appreciate it. Same thing from Gene. I know you just started listening to the podcast and you had mentioned that as well. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And something you can do if you're listening to this for the first time, just take the time to subscribe to our show here at RentPrep for Landlords. Right now, we're on a model where we're doing a RentPrep Court every other week, and then we're having on guests that are kind of giving us their insights in tenant screening, real estate investing, and they're just kind of toggling back and forth every week, so you can kind of mix it up a little bit here on the show. So take the time, subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review if you want. That's always appreciated. And thank you. We appreciate you guys listening, giving us feedback, and until next week.
Until next week.
All right, and make sure you don't get a renter who's going to drop penises in your
Or at least get
property.
a portfolio of what they look like. It should be a good looking one. The one that we saw, the Venn diagram.
It was bad.
It was bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
check it out in the show notes
Yeah.
for sure. All right. Take care, everyone.